Hello there and welcome back to another edition of the Hot Lab Classic Remastered. This time we're taking a look at the 1999 Lotus Esprit Sport 350. Our second Lotus Esprit to take on the Trek. The first one going around well back. I think it was like the 11th or 12th car to go around. And it did pretty well, to be fair to it, so time to see how the Sport 350 gets along. The Sport 350 was a trim package for the Esprit in the later years. You got this weird aluminium wing and some interesting decals down the side of it. It doesn't really fit the Esprit, but then again the Esprit in its later years didn't really fit the original concept of the Esprit particularly. But this is still my favourite years of the Esprit when it had the big V8. And yeah, it was cool. It was a good way to send this car out that had been around for... Well, by the time this game came out and this Sport 350 was around, this car had been out well over 20 years, so time to see how it gets along. Statistically, it is pretty good mid-engine rear-wheel drive, 669 horsepower, 1,157 kilos. Those are the same statistics, I believe, exactly the same as those you'll find in a standard Esprit. Anyways, this is going to get 6 laps of the Motorsport Land track in order to set the best time it possibly can. Our current leader is the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 6 rally car, which set a time of a 27.718. Completely did not have to go up through the leaderboard looking for that one. The previous Esprit to go around currently sits in 80th place, a 30.592. The Sport 350. So, I'm not actually too sure on the changes between this and the normal car. I'm assuming this probably has sort of like beefier brakes, maybe some sort of upgrade to the suspension, and of course the wing, but other than that I'm not too sure what's going on under the hood here and whether it is going to be massively upgraded from the standard car. I'd imagine not, considering the Esprit was notoriously hard to upgrade in its later years. For example, Esprits have a Citroen gearbox in them, and it was either Citroen or Renault. Sorry, it was a Renault gearbox, and the Renault gearbox was basically the limiting factor in this car. So if you try to run this Esprit, the gearbox would implode because it had a specific amount of power and torque that it could deal with. 350 was the number. So they beefed up this 5-speed that was ancient, by the way. They beefed it up as much as they could, to their credit, but there is of course only so much you can do with beefing up the internals before you basically need a new gearbox. And by this point, obviously, this was the 90s, and while the Esprit was attempting to have a bit of a resurgence, obviously there's no point of dumping too much money into a car which was going to be made redundant very soon. I think the Esprit stuck around until 2004, before eventually it was killed off. I think pedestrian safety or some sort of EU clause ended up killing the Esprit off. There's a bit of a Lotus Esprit factoid for you. Also, this has the rear lights from an E86 Corolla, as it did at this point in its life. In terms of how it's driving, because I haven't really got onto that too much, the turbo, this is a Stage 4 turbo, I think, and it is a little bit tricky to drive this car with it. You can definitely tell when all the power kicks in because the tail goes out, basically, which is not ideal. That's why I'm having to be very delicate on the power as it comes round. Run to the line, 30.381. Not bad. A little bit quicker than it was before. I sort of think there's a little bit of time left in this. That last lap didn't feel that quick, but like I say, the power delivery on this does feel a little bit strange. Mind you, that's telling me there's not a lot in it, but I definitely think there's probably 0.2 in there. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. Obviously all these cars run race suspension, so suspension tuning shouldn't factor into this, but if this was lower than a standard Esprit, maybe that could be affecting this potentially. I don't know. We'll have to see when the V8 SE goes around, which is the other Lotus Esprit we've got to look at. But anyways, a 30.381 will place this into 73rd place. Goes in between a Honda Civic Ferio and the Renault Clio Sport V6. It is, you can't see it from here, but it is about 0.1 and a bit up on the original Esprit V8. Actually, it's 0.2 up on that. Around here, Altezza 280 Toms, Mazda Roadster, the Audi A3. There's not a lot massively comparable. It does lose out slightly to the TVR Cerberus and Chimera, which is quite surprising because you'd figure this would be a bit better to drive. But again, the turbocharger on this, I think, is a bit of a problem. Those TVRs are naturally aspirated, so the power's a little bit more well behaved. But yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It definitely isn't bad for a car that's as old as this one is. Underneath, that is still a pretty good time, and yeah, good job, Esprit. Anyways, that's it for this episode. Thank you all very much for watching. Join me next time when I'll be driving something completely different. Until then, farewell.